Hey guys, this is Brandon Jaffe of Inspired Resolutions, and I wanted to give you a quick recap on our Monday night group tonight, our parenting group. Um, the first point I want to go over is a lot of times you mothers, you fathers, you're overwhelmed, whether no matter what age the kids are at, right? But especially when they become teenagers, you feel like there's all these things that you're supposed to do, and you're taking all this advice from parents and other parents and your neighbors and your friends, and it gets overwhelming, and you have this list of things you think you're supposed to do. You're supposed to punish enough, you're supposed to reward enough, you're supposed to have this lecture or this talk, and sometimes that exceeds what you actually have to give. You're working, you're trying to be in relationship with other siblings, you are trying to run a marriage, you're trying to run a household, you're trying to keep things clean. And so you only have so much time, effort, and energy that you can give. And so I want you to, before you think about all the advice that you've gotten, give yourself permission to only do what you can, to admit what you can do and what you have to give, and let go of the rest. Give yourself permission to do what you can, not what you're supposed to do. And I think that's really important for self-care and for just being able to function sometimes as a parent. You can't do everything. The next point that came up that I thought was really important tonight was just because you're putting your relationship first, in other words, you're making the relationship with your child more important than parenting your child. I know that's a wild concept sometimes. That isn't be your child's friend, so don't mistake those two concepts. But sometimes when you accept what you cannot control, you now can put the relationship first. You've set your boundaries, you've focused on every way that you influence your child. And I think this point is important. Putting the relationship first does not equal you don't care. Sometimes because you care so much, you put the relationship first and you let go of the things that you cannot control. One of the main things that gets in the way of putting relationship first is a parent's ego. Your ego tells you that you should have control. Your ego tells you that you're right. Your ego tells you that this child who's trying to figure life out and is on a totally different journey than yours is supposed to mind you and fall in line. And so sometimes your ego will get in the way of you admitting and accepting the things that you can't control, and will get in the way of you putting that relationship first. The third point that I really thought was awesome that we discussed tonight was modeling for your child how to respond when you are unhappy, or when you aren't getting your way with them, when you can't control the things around you. How you model what you model in terms of your reaction to those times is going to be really important. And I'm going to be honest, most parents, when your child doesn't mind you, when you're not getting what you want from them, when you feel like you're not in control of your child, you raise your voice, you yell, you maybe even use cuss words, you might demean them, even though you're saying that you're telling them the truth. And so is it any wonder that what they give back to you is anger, yelling, maybe some name calling, right? Even though they might be wrong, they don't feel wrong, they feel right. And so I think it's important for parents to model how you behave when you're not getting your way, right? I want you to behave. I want all of us parents to behave in a cool, calm, collected manner, even when we can't figure out a way to control the situation. So modeling how you want them to speak to you when they are unhappy was a great part of our discussion tonight. The next, I guess, idea that got brought up from one of the participants tonight, I really liked. And she said, it's important to set the tone of the conversation, no matter how difficult or how contentious the conversation is. No matter what, every parent can set the tone. And I think we set the tone through patterns of how we're going to discuss things, right? Because if we always have a cool, calm, collected demeanor and tone about us, we've set the tone through the history of our conversating, not just in the moment. And so setting the tone now and setting the tone through the patterns of how you discuss things is really important. And how do we want to set the tone? Well, we want to keep it, even if it's a deep conversation or a difficult conversation, we want to keep it light. We want to keep it calm. We want to keep it collected. And we want to we want to show them that we're willing to listen. It's not just a nagging, lecture of a conversation. I want to circle back because something that came up through talking to one of the participants is they were getting a lot of feedback from a lot of people in terms of how to parent their child, their difficult child that they're struggling with. And getting too much feedback, researching, maybe even reading and getting help is really important. But there comes a point that you might be getting too much feedback. If you're overwhelmed by all the information that you're getting, my advice is stop everything, choose somebody to get help from, and follow through with that, whatever that help is that you're getting consistently, so that you can see if it fits for your situation. When you start taking bits of contradictory information over here and over here and over here, and you start piecemealing it all together and trying to do everything that everybody is saying, it can be not only overwhelming, but it can be detrimental to helping your family. Okay, so there does come a point that getting too much feedback can be harmful. The there's two more points I want to go over, but they kind of fit hand in hand. And so we discussed how to influence your child. And a lot of people come to group or come to me for therapy, trying to figure out how they can control and change their children. And that's one of the first things I try to flip. I'm not going to teach you how to control or change your child. That's their journey. Okay, your child may be going down a bad path and they're going to need to ask for help and change themselves. Now, you can provide a few things and you can behave in a way, parent your child in a way that makes you more influential. So I want parents focusing on how can I become a greater influence in my child's life. And I'm going to be honest, when becoming an influence in your child's life doesn't mean that you're going to become the most influential person in their life. By the time they become teens, you only have so much influence. You're their parent, right? You've already taught them all the lessons. In fact, some of the stars that they see on social media, some of the messages they get from a teacher that they love, their friends might be more influential in their lives. And so we want to optimize the influence that you do have. And so here are the only ways that you actually can increase the influence over your child. The first is what you model. We talked about that earlier. Okay, what you model is really important. That is one way that you influence your child. The second are the boundaries, the healthy boundaries that you set, not the punishments and rewards. Okay, if you have a difficult child, punishment and reward, it works for maybe 2 weeks and it doesn't continue its influence or ability to control. But boundaries are something that are protective. I control the follow through. They're concrete and they are relevant to protection of myself and the relationships that I have. I'm not going to go into, I could talk about boundaries all day. And they are, for many people, a hard thing to learn to set in a healthy way, because we think of boundaries as being something that we want and a way to change the people that are maybe harming us in our life. That's not what boundaries are. So the third, so it's models, boundaries, and then our lectures and lessons. We've got to lecture our kids. We do have to teach them lessons. But what happens is parents rely solely on that, and you keep nagging and you keep giving the same lecture and lesson over and over again. Your kid already knows. And so you want to be careful that you don't give lessons and lectures to insanity, right? And that's that point. Insanity is that point that you cross where you're almost pushing them in the opposite direction of the lesson you're trying to give them, because you're trying to jam that lesson down their throat. Okay, I usually tell parents, give it once, maybe twice, third time's insanity. The fourth is the resources that you give them. Okay, you definitely influence them, right? If they're failing and you're willing to give them certain resources like tutoring, but the resources you give your child definitely influence their ability for success and their ability to make changes. And sometimes here's the problem: sometimes they're going to reject the resources that you're giving them at any given point in time, and you might have to kind of let go of that and go, okay, I offered the resources, that's all I have to give. And later on, if you have a healthy relationship, they might circle back and want to take advantage of the resources you have to give them. But resources are a way that you influence your child. Now, the next one is really important, and it's one that every parent thinks that they are doing, and many are not. No, hear my words, loving on your child. I didn't say loving your child, okay? A lot of parents love their children and do terrible things or say harmful things. Loving your child is almost irrelevant. I know it sounds wild, but it is almost irrelevant in terms of influence. Okay, it's important for you to love your child, don't get me wrong. But in terms of influencing your child, loving on your child, and again, that's another topic I could talk about forever. An example, loving on your child is saying, hey, I love you. Loving on your child is when you decide to never yell again out of anger. Loving on your child is spending time with them. So loving on them is really important. Now, this next way that you influence them, it kind of ties everything together, okay? Being happy. If you are not a happy parent, you are not an influential parent. And everything you say might as well go out the window. It's going in one ear and out the other, if not causing harm. When you are a miserable parent, it doesn't even matter if you're happy. They have to believe that you're happy. So if they see you coming home from work totally unhappy every day, and your marriage is unhappy, and their shenanigans brings you to the point that you can't self-care and be happy, what happens is we as humans are attracted to those we think are the most happy. So if the most happy people in their life are the most unhealthy guys taking drugs and doing the wrong thing, and the most, and you're a parent who says you got to go to school, but you're really unhappy with your job, guess what? They're going, my parents are unhappy. They're telling me to go to school. All right, I'm not going to work on school. The happiest people I know are the stoners that I hang out with. Maybe smoking weed is the way to being happy, because my parents who keep telling me not to smoke weed, and my parents who keep telling me to go work hard in school, they're miserable. They're happy. And so what happens is if you are miserable, if you are unhappy, you are going to influence your child in the wrong way. And so finding a way to be happy is really important. And none of this works if you're not consistent. You've got to be consistent with what you model. You've got to be consistent with your boundaries and your lessons and your resources, and in being happy and in loving on them. If you're not consistent, none of it matters, okay? Another topic that we talked about that I often bring up in group is the 90-10 rule. And the 90-10 rule will help you with all these ways that you are an influence. And so the 90-10 rule says you should be spending 90% of your engagements with your child, 90% of the time that you're interacting with your child should be happy-go-lucky, either surfacey or fun or just kind of nothing interactions. Only 10% of the time should be parenting moments, those lectures and the boundary setting and the following through. And so that becomes hard, especially if you have a difficult child. I get it. But that 90-10 rule, when you follow it, kind of keeps you in check, and you can put the relationship first, and you can be you can follow through with the ways of influencing your child. So thank you for listening. I hope this helps, and we will see you again after our parenting group.